After being treated like a servant for years, I left without a word and let my family collapse. The last thing I did before I walked out was empty the dishwasher. It sounds ridiculous, but I can still feel the heat of the plates on my fingers, the little puff of steam when I opened the door. It was 5:12 a.m., the kitchen light was the only thing on, and the house was in that heavy kind of silence where you can hear the fridge hum and the tick of the cheap wall clock. My suitcase was already in the car. My backpack with my documents and phone charger was by the front door, propped against the umbrella stand. I stacked the plates in the cupboard automatically, hands moving on muscle memory, and somewhere between the last mug and the cutlery drawer I realized this was the final chore I would ever do in this house. I dried my hands on the tea towel, hung it up neatly out of habit, and actually laughed. It came out a shaky, sort of half-choke, the kind of sound you make when you're trying not to cry, and something in your brain misfires. I glanced down the hallway. My parents' bedroom door was shut. My younger brother's room was a dark rectangle, his headphones probably still on his ears from whatever game he'd been playing when I went to bed. No one knew that my fuel tank was full, that I'd booked a room 3 hours away under a name close enough to mine that I'd remember it, but far enough that they wouldn't immediately find me on a hotel reservation. No one knew I'd signed a lease for a small studio near my work, that I'd been slowly moving non-essential things, clothes I didn't wear anymore, a few books, my documents, into a friend's spare closet. I slipped my house keys off the ring, held them in my palm for a second, then placed them on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl like I was returning a borrowed pen. Here's the part that makes me sound cold. I didn't leave a note. Not a thank you, not a sorry, nothing. I opened the front door as quietly as I could, walked into the damp morning air, and pulled it shut behind me with the lightest click. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel in my neck. I stood on the porch for a moment, just breathing. No one yelled. No lights flipped on. I walked to my car, put the suitcase in the boot, got in, and drove away from the house I'd spent my whole life maintaining for other people. I didn't always plan to disappear like that. I didn't grow up thinking, one day I'll vanish and watch them struggle. It was more like being slowly backed into a corner until the only way out was through the wall. I'm the eldest daughter in a family where that phrase might as well be a job title. We're not technically first-generation immigrants. My parents came here when they were kids themselves, but they carried all the expectations with them. Family first. Respect your elders. Don't air dirty laundry. Help your siblings. And because my parents both worked long hours and we couldn't afford much outside help, help your family gradually turned into run the household. When I was 8, helping meant setting the table and washing the cups. By 10, I could cook rice perfectly and knew how to iron my father's shirts. By 14, I was doing full grocery runs with my mom's card, budgeting in my head, because if I went over even by $10, she'd snap about not understanding how hard we work. I learned to read utility bills before I learned to drive. I knew that the electricity company would give you a week's extension if you called and were polite, that the water bill always came in the third week of the month, that the internet would be cut off in exactly 10 days if you ignored the red notice. My brother, Leo, is 3 years younger than me. Somehow we grew up in completely different houses. He got away with forgetting chores, with leaving his dishes on the table, with blasting music in his room while I scrubbed the bathroom. If I complained, my mother would say, "He's a boy. He needs his rest. You're better at these things." My father would add, "You should be proud to know how to run a home. It will make you a good wife one day." That sentence stuck under my skin like a splinter. In high school, my day was wake up at 5:30, start laundry, make breakfast, pack lunches, catch the bus, do school, come home, cook dinner, clean up, help Leo with homework, then squeeze my own assignments into whatever sleep-deprived hours were left. On the rare occasions I tried to say no, like when I had exams and asked if someone else could cook just that week, I'd get a combination of guilt and contempt. "We all have to make sacrifices," my dad would say. "If you can't balance your studies and your home, how will you manage in life?" My mom would add. Leo would shrug and go back to playing FIFA. I don't want to make this sound like a melodrama where I was Cinderella and they were cartoon villains. There were good moments. My mom would bring me mango slices when I studied late. My dad showed up to every parent-teacher meeting beaming with pride at my grades. Leo and I used to watch stupid comedy shows together and laugh until we cried. But even those good moments were layered on top of this constant expectation that my hands would always be busy, that my time was the family's by default. The pattern followed me into adulthood. We're not rich, so I stayed at home through university to save money. It made sense on paper. Why pay rent when you can live with your parents, especially when you're commuting to a local campus? But the thing about staying is that no one ever updates your role. I was still the responsible one, which apparently meant the one who can be relied on to pick up everyone else's slack. When I got my first part-time job at a pharmacy, Mom said, "That's great, you can contribute to groceries." When Leo got his first part-time job at a car wash, she said, "That's great, you can start saving for a car." You see the difference? I told myself I could handle it because there was an end point. Get the degree, get a decent job, move out. Simple. And I did get the degree. I graduated with decent honors and landed a job as a data analyst at a mid-sized company. The hours were long, but the pay was finally something that didn't feel like a joke. That's when things really sharpened. "You're making good money now," my dad said, waving the offer letter like he'd gotten the job himself. "You can help us pay off the car sooner. Maybe we can finally renovate the bathroom." It wasn't a request. By the end of my first year, I was contributing half of every pay to household expenses. I have a spreadsheet somewhere that shows it. Income, minus transfer to house, minus my phone bill, minus my bus pass, minus random things my family borrowed that never came back. There were months I had less disposable income than Leo, who worked 3 shifts a week and whose contributions varied, depending on whether he remembered to transfer money. Whenever I tried to tighten my budget, a new emergency would pop up. Aunt needed help with a bill. Nana's medication. The washing machine died. It wasn't that I didn't want to help. I love my family. But no matter how much I gave, it never translated to actual respect for my time or boundaries. A typical day at 26 looked like this. Up at 6, make breakfast, pack my lunch, leave at 7, commute an hour to work, stare at spreadsheets until 5:30, commute home, pick up milk or bread or whatever from the store on the way, come into what's for dinner before I'd even taken my shoes off. Cook, eat, clean, collapse, repeat. If I dare to be late or eat out with colleagues, I get passive-aggressive comments. "Must be nice to have time to sit in restaurants," Mom would say. "I thought you said you were saving to move out," Dad would add. "You can't do that if you're wasting money on takeaways." They never saw the irony that I was cooking for 4 adults every night for free. The first crack in whatever loyalty-worn armor I had left came at Christmas 2 years ago. We decided to host the extended family. It was my idea, technically because Mom loves having everyone together but gets overwhelmed, and I thought, stupidly, that if I organized it well, it wouldn't kill me. I spent 3 days planning menus, shopping, pre-cooking what I could. On the actual day, I was on my feet from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., chopping, stirring, serving, washing, smiling. Leo's contributions were helping for 10 minutes, then disappearing to his room to change, and later getting drunk with our cousins and spilling dip on the rug. At one point, while I was elbow deep in soapy water, I overheard my aunt telling my mom in the living room, "You're so lucky to have a daughter like her. She's like a little housewife already." Mom laughed. "Well, someone has to be." That little housewife comment did something to me. It lodged in my brain and started to rot. Something about the idea that my entire personality had collapsed into unpaid domestic labor for a family I wasn't even starting. Then, after everyone left and I finally sat down with a plate of food at nearly 11 p.m., my dad looked at the dishes still stacked in the sink and said, "You should clean that tonight, otherwise it will stink in the morning." I wish I could tell you I said something dramatic then, that I flipped the plate or told him to wash it himself. I didn't. I stood up like a robot and went back to the sink. But I cried silently while I did it. And somewhere between scrubbing the roasting pan and stacking glasses, a small, hard decision formed in my chest. This cannot be the rest of my life. It wasn't one explosion. It was a series of smaller moments that built up after that. There was the time I got sick with a brutal flu, and my mother stood at my door, not with soup, but with a laundry basket. "Can you at least fold these while you're lying down?" she asked. There was the day my manager pulled me aside and gently suggested I try not to answer family calls during work hours because it was affecting your focus. And I looked at my call log and realized I had 10 missed calls from my mother in one afternoon for things like, "Where did you put the cumin?" There was Leo announcing at dinner that he'd put a deposit on a car. My parents clapped and congratulated him, and my dad said, "See, this is why we didn't make him pay as much board, so he could get ahead." I almost choked on my food. I've been giving them $400 a week for years and had nothing to show for it except exhaustion and a nice selection of cleaning products. The final straw, though, was simple. I told them I'd found a small one-bedroom unit to rent close to my office and that I was thinking of applying. I'd rehearsed the conversation in my head, trying to sound adult and practical, not defensive. Dad's first reaction was, "Why? You have a home." Mom's was, "Are we not good enough for you anymore?" "I spend 3 hours a day commuting," I said carefully. "I'm tired. I want to live closer to work, and I think it's time I had my own space." "You already have your own room," Leo said, shoveling rice into his mouth. "That's not the same thing," I snapped. Dad shook his head. "We've supported you all these years, and this is your thanks? Leaving us as soon as you can afford to. What about us? We're not getting any younger. We asked you to contribute for the house, not abandon it," Mom added. Something in me broke. "I'm not abandoning you," I said. "I'm moving out. Normal adults move out." The conversation went in circles. Every practical argument I offered was met with emotion. Eventually, my dad said, "If you move out, don't expect things to be the same. You don't just walk away from family responsibilities." That night, in bed, staring at the crack in the ceiling I'd stared at since I was 15, I realized they would never see me as a separate adult. I was a function, a role, free live-in help, and they were not going to give me permission to stop. So I stopped asking. I started planning, quietly. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank and diverted a portion of my salary before it hit the house account. I cut my own spending to the bone. No takeaway, no new clothes, no Netflix, nothing that would look like wasting money to my parents while I was bleeding out my free time for them. At work, I spoke to my manager about the possibility of transferring to a different branch in another city. It turned out there was a position opening up 3 hours away with a small relocation bonus. The pay was the same, but the rent in that city was cheaper, and more importantly, it was 3 hours away. Far enough that they couldn't just show up unannounced. Close enough that I didn't feel like I was abandoning my grandmother and extended family entirely. I got the transfer. I didn't tell my family. I just started taking personal calls in the stairwell and telling Mom I was on a project whenever she asked why I was home late. I found a studio. It wasn't glamorous, tiny kitchenette, view of a brick wall, bathroom that was basically a tiled cupboard, but when I stepped into it, it felt like oxygen. I signed the lease, paid the bond out of my secret savings, and cried in my car afterwards for a solid 15 minutes. I told exactly 3 people about my plan. My friend Amaya, who lived near my work and agreed to stash some of my things in her spare cupboard. My manager, who needed to know my last day in this branch. And my aunt on my dad's side, the only member of my extended family who consistently treated me like a human being and not a resource. My aunt hugged me in her kitchen and whispered, "I always knew you'd have to leave like this. Your parents love you, but they love what you do for them more. Don't let the guilt drag you back." The week before I left, I moved in small increments. Winter clothes I wasn't using, the box of old textbooks my mom had been telling me to get rid of for years. I took them anyway. Copies of my birth certificate and passport for a job application. I lied. Every night, I'd lie in bed and imagine backing out. Imagine my mother crying, my father shouting. Every morning, I'd wake up and the resentment would be there, solid as ever, pushing me forward. On my last evening at home, nothing special happened. That hurt a little. No big family dinner, no movie night. Mom asked me to pick up potatoes on the way home. Dad watched TV. Leo yelled at his game. I made stew, did the dishes, wiped the counters. I went to bed with my alarm set for 4:30 a.m. When my alarm went off, I moved like a thief in my own life. Showered quietly, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, loaded my last bag. Toiletries, the 2 framed photos I actually cared about. I took one last walk through the house, more out of habit than sentiment. I checked the stove. I checked the front door lock. I emptied the dishwasher. I put my keys on the counter. Then I left. The first hour of the drive, I cried. Then I laughed. Then I felt sick. Then nothing. It was like my emotions were on shuffle. When I finally pulled into a service station, my phone had 12 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, and 1 from Leo. The first voicemail was my mom's groggy voice. "Where are you? Did you go to work early? Call me." The next was sharper. "Why are your keys on the bench? Call me back now." By the 6th, she was crying and my dad was in the background saying, "This is what she always wanted, to leave us." I turned the phone off. I know that makes me sound cruel. Maybe I was being cruel. But if I didn't give myself at least a day of silence, I knew they'd talk me into turning around. I checked into the hotel under the slightly misspelled version of my name, dragged my suitcase inside, and sat on the bed staring at the beige curtains. The quiet felt wrong. No TV blaring, no kitchen noises, no one yelling my name from another room. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the occasional car passing outside. I didn't go back. I started my new role the following Monday. I rented a moving van, picked up the boxes from Amaya's place, and moved into my shoebox of a studio. I bought a second-hand couch, a cheap set of plates, 1 pot, 1 pan. The first meal I cooked, there was pasta with Jared sauce, and it tasted like freedom. No one else's portion sizes to consider. No one asking what was for dinner before I'd even finished work for the day. The calls kept coming for a while. I eventually turned my phone back on and listened to a few voicemails. My parents' messages cycled through anger, guilt, desperation, and then something like resigned hurt. "How could you do this without telling us? Who's going to take your father to his appointments? Your brother is useless. You know this. You think your new life will make you happy? Family is all that matters. If you loved us, you wouldn't have done this." That line, "if you loved us," hurt the most because it wasn't true in the way they meant. I left because I loved them, and because staying meant I was starting to hate them. It's hard to explain that to people who think love is measured in sacrifice alone. I didn't respond for the first month. It was like detox. I went to work, came home, learned what I liked when no one else's preferences mattered. It sounds simple, but it was weirdly hard. Did I actually like cooking elaborate meals? Or had I just adapted? Turns out I'm fine with scrambled eggs on toast 3 nights a week. In the second month, I called my aunt. She gave me the family news. "Your mom's been telling everyone you've gone away for work," she said. "She's too proud to admit you left because you were tired." "Have you told her why I left?" I asked. "She knows," my aunt said, "even if she won't say it out loud. Your father, too. How's Leo coping?" She hesitated. "He's shocked. They've been leaning on him more. He doesn't like it." I almost laughed. "Welcome to the party, I guess. Don't feel guilty for that," she said sharply, as if she'd heard my brain spool up. "He's an adult. He can learn, or he can move out too. You were never supposed to be the only pillar holding up that house." About 3 months in, Leo called from a random number. I answered mostly because I was curious. "Where did you go?" he blurted, skipping any greeting. He sounded tired in a way I'd never heard before. "They're freaking out. Dad's been making me do the banking. Mom keeps crying. The house is a mess. They keep saying, 'Why can't you be more like your sister?'" I sat on my little couch and took a breath. "I want to live my own life," I said. "Like you've been doing for years without the laundry basket attached." "That's not fair," he said automatically. I didn't respond. He sighed. "Okay, maybe it is a bit. You could have told me. I tried telling all of you for years," I said, "that I was tired, that I couldn't do everything. No one listened until I stopped doing it." There was a long silence. "They want you to come back," he said finally. "I'm not coming back," I said. My voice surprised me. It was calm, solid. "I love you. I love them. But I'm not going back to being their full-time, unpaid housekeeper." "What if they change?" he asked weakly. "Then they can talk to me like adults," I said. "Not manipulate me with guilt. And it would have to be real change, not temporary good behavior until the crisis passes." Another pause. Then, quietly, "It's really hard without you." I closed my eyes. "It was really hard with me," I said. "It was just hard for one person instead of 3. He didn't have an answer to that. Over the next year, I watched mostly from a distance as my family adjusted, I guess is the polite word. Collapsed is the dramatic one, but it felt like that sometimes too. My mother had to start doing her own appointments again or rely on my aunt or Leo. She hated asking, according to my aunt, but she hated admitting that I was gone more. The house fell into that slightly chaotic state you get when no one knows where anything lives. My dad missed a utilities payment and had the power cut off once. Leo burned dinner so badly they had to air out the whole place. There were fights, lots of fights. Once, my aunt put me on speakerphone without telling them, and I listened to my parents argue about me. "You pushed her too hard," my aunt said. "She's ungrateful," my dad shot back. "We gave her everything. Food, a roof, education. And she leaves like a thief." "She left like someone who had to sneak past the guard dog," my aunt replied. "Ask yourself why she felt she couldn't tell you." Mom's voice small. "We just wanted her to be close. We thought she'd always be here." That last part twisted something in me. Because on some level, I'd thought that too. That I was stuck there forever, orbiting their needs. I eventually agreed to meet them in a neutral place. My aunt's house, not theirs. It was about 8 months after I left. I brought Emma with me, partly for support, partly as a buffer. Seeing my parents after so long was surreal. They looked older, both of them. My mom's hair had more gray in it. My dad's posture was slightly more stooped. He looked at me like he was afraid I might vanish again if he blinked. We sat around my aunt's dining table, the same table where we'd eaten Sunday lunches for years. No one reached for food. "You look thin," was my mother's opening line. Classic. "I'm fine," I said. An awkward silence settled. My aunt, bless her, excused herself to make tea and left the room. "We were very hurt," my dad said eventually. "You left without saying anything. Do you know what that did to your mother?" "Yes," I said. "Do you know what the last 15 years did to me?" He winced. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We never asked you to do everything," she said. "You didn't have to," I replied. "You just never stepped in when I was drowning. You expected me to run the house, help everyone, give you my money, and be grateful. And when I said I wanted my own life, you treated it like a betrayal." Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. My dad stared at the table. "Maybe we relied on you too much," he said slowly. It sounded like dragging barbed wire out of his throat. "We thought you were strong. You could handle it." "I was strong," I said, "until I wasn't." That's the thing about using a person as a support beam. Eventually they crack. More silence. My aunt came back with tea and a plate of biscuits. Sat down without saying anything, just being there like a referee who's seen too many games go into overtime. "We want you to come home," my mother said suddenly. Her voice wobbled. "We'll do better. You can have more time for yourself. We'll hire someone to help with cleaning. Your father will." "I'm not moving back," I said. It almost physically hurt to say, but I knew if I left any wiggle room, they'd wedge themselves into it. My home is my apartment now. I'll visit. I'll help where I can. But I'm not going back to that role. My dad's face hardened. "So that's it?" he asked. "You're too good for us now?" I stared at him. "No," I said. "I finally think I'm just good enough for myself." That sounds like a neat mic drop line, but in reality, my voice cracked on myself, and I had to take a sip of tea to stop my hand from shaking. My aunt cleared her throat. "They can respect that," she said calmly, looking pointedly at my parents. "Or they can lose you completely. Those are the options." My visit ended without dramatic reconciliation. There were hugs, stiff ones. My mom stroked my hair like she used to when I was little and whispered, "Don't stay away so long next time." My dad patted my shoulder awkwardly. Leo texted me later. "Thanks for putting up with them. I'm thinking of moving out too." I told him I'd help look over leases if he wanted. That's the thing. Leaving didn't mean I stopped caring. It meant I stopped letting my caring be weaponized. I know some people reading this will think I'm heartless. That family comes first. That our parents do so much for us that we owe them. I've had those phrases carved into my brain since childhood. But here's what I've learned. There's a difference between help and servitude, between loving your family and erasing yourself for them. When I say, I let my family collapse, I don't mean I sat back with popcorn watching them suffer. I mean I stepped out of a role I never should have been forced into alone and the imbalance that had been hidden by my labor became visible. They had to relearn how to function without a built-in maid/secretary/therapist. They had to face the reality that your eldest daughter is not a permanent solution to every gap in your own grown-up skills. I'm still figuring out what my life looks like when it's mine. I still feel guilty. I still wake up some mornings with that panic that I've forgotten to defrost the chicken or pay the gas bill, and then remember those things are no longer my responsibility there. I still visit a few times a year, and I still do small things because I want to, not because I have to. I show my mom how to set reminders on her phone. I help my dad fill out an online form while emphasizing, you can do this yourself next time. The difference is when I leave their house now, I go back to my own. I unlock my own door with my own key. I make eggs for one, wash my one plate, and sit on my couch in the quiet that used to scare me and now feels like freedom. They haven't collapsed completely. People rarely do. They've bent, adapted, grumbled their way into new patterns. Sometimes my aunt calls and says, your mom actually cooked 3 times this week, in that amazed tone. Leo texted me a photo the other day of him holding a laundry basket with the caption, look, I evolved. It's not a fairy tale. There's still resentment there. There's still moments when my dad says something like, if you'd stayed, things would be easier, and I have to bite back a retort. There are still relatives who whisper that I abandoned my parents. But I know what the alternative was, a slow, quiet kind of dying inside my own life, worn down by 1,000 little obligations other people decided I owed. So I left. Without a word, without a scene, with my hands smelling of dish soap and my heart pounding, I walked away. And in the space where I used to stand, they finally saw the shape of what they'd built on my back.